Michael Patrick MacDonald, an Irish-American, wrote his national bestseller All Souls in 1999, which conveys the story of a Boston neighborhood with an immense amount of white poverty. During the 1970s, within South Boston, 3 major housing projects were constructed, which included D Street, Old Colony, and Columbia Point. The interactions between the 3 projects led to racial tensions and resulted in violence from the integration of races in various schools. South Boston was divided by neighborhood, but most people living there thought of themselves, no matter how poor they were, as better than black people. At least you're not black. This was the phrase that kept the poor whites motivated throughout the community. The word race did not necessarily mean the color of one's skin. It defined the status and level of certain people within the community. The tensions and aggression in Boston were not racial. It was the whites' fear of being lowered in their social ladder and class. MacDonald portrays the frustration of white Irish living in South Boston during the 1970s and how it affected blacks and whites. There were no separate but equal laws in Boston, but racism was quite apparent within the community. All Souls, while clarifying the violence of school busing riots in South Boston, introduces us to characters such as MacDonald's Ma, who was the mother of 11 children. These characters represent a typical family in the projects at the time. MacDonald also describes to the readers what it was like living in the Southie projects through the eyes of Michael, a 2nd grader and one of Ma's sons. Michael viewed Old Colony as his ghetto heaven and learned to love the lifestyle that was being created in the projects of Southie, until his world within a world was interrupted by a Supreme Court judge who ruled for integration throughout the Boston public schools. Wendell Arthur Garrity Jr. was a Supreme Court judge whose ruling mandated busing, although it would not affect him since he lived in a white suburban town, Wellesley, Massachusetts. Commercial break. Commercial break.
This diner is pulling a switch on the regulars by serving new instant Maxwell House. What's it taste like? Fresh perked coffee, that's what it tastes like. New Instant Max. Now a better blend of coffee beans, freshly perked for more fresh perked taste. We call it the Perky Instant.
Louise Day Hicks came from a very well-off Irish family. As the school committee chair, she opposed Boston busing and integration. Hicks made a substantial influence to the people. Not only did she give the people a language, she also gave them a voice. Ms. Hicks states that busing is being forced on South Boston from people who aren't even from the community. She also proclaims that Boston is stealing the freedom and liberty of the people in South Boston. Hicks also led many protests about integration in Columbia Point. They called the marches motorcade. It was a huge gathering of all the people in different projects. As the ruling was implemented and desegregation in the schools began, so did the riots, which included the throwing of rocks, bricks, sticks, and even glass bottles at the buses that carried the black children to school. Michael described this experience as being at war. When Michael throws a rock at a bus, he says he only wanted to see the others see him throw it, even though he didn't want the rock to actually hit the bus. He simply wanted to be a part of it all. Throwing the rocks at the buses, whether or not you actually hit the bus, was what it meant to be a part of Southie. Integration caused tension because the white people living in the Southie projects enjoyed where they were living, and they didn't want to get bussed out of their ghetto heaven, just to be integrated with a race that they did not want to be associated with. To make matters worse, they were being controlled by a white judge whose ruling would not even affect him or his community. All Souls told the story of a family within a larger part of Boston's history and the busing crisis.